The lantern's flame flickered behind its glass pane, stretching long, tired shadows across the worn wooden walls of the ranch house. Elle sat in her chair, positioned to catch the faintest whisper of a breeze through the open window. Outside, the crickets carried on their nightly chorus. The air was rich with the scent of mesquite and the dry perfume of summer dust. In the deep quiet, broken only by a ticking clock, a woman was learning, year by year, how to endure a silence that was far too vast. Then, a series of 3 knocks echoed against the door. They were not forceful or rushed, just 3 soft taps, as if someone were cautiously testing the boundary of a dream. Elle rose from her chair, and the old floorboards issued a gentle complaint beneath her worn boots. As she crossed the room, her hand reaching for the doorknob, her heart gave a single, solid thump against her ribs. She paused for a beat. Visitors this far out usually meant one of 2 things: they were bringing trouble, or they were running from it. She pulled the door open. A small boy, perhaps 6 years old, stood before her. His hair was a pale blonde, his feet were bare in the dirt, and his shirt was streaked with dust. Dried tears had left faint trails on one of his cheeks. He gazed up at her with a kind of resolute courage that seemed out of place in a child. "My mama kicked us out," he stated, his voice small but steady. Elle's gaze shifted. The boy swallowed nervously and glanced over his shoulder. There, slumped in the shadows near the corner of the barn, was the dark shape of a man. The lantern light barely touched him, but it was enough to reveal a shirt torn at the collar and an arm lying limp in the tall grass. Elle moved past the boy, crossing the yard in a few long strides before kneeling beside the crumpled figure. His skin was feverish and damp, and his breathing was alarmingly shallow. He couldn't have been much older than 30, younger than she was, though life had clearly taken its toll. She didn't bother with questions just yet. With great care, she lifted him, mindful of his neck. He didn't wake, only let out a soft sigh like a person sinking further into a deep sleep. The boy followed her closely, his arms wrapped tightly around his own small frame, his wide eyes tracking her every move. Inside, the house smelled of pine soap and wood smoke. Elle gently placed the man on her old leather sofa and draped a wool blanket over him. The boy lingered in the doorway, a small, uncertain figure. Elle turned to him. "Name?" "Leo," he answered, nodding. "Is that your father?" "Yes." Elle gestured with her head toward the fireplace. Sit. Leo did as he was told. Elle poured water from a jug into a tin cup and handed it to him. She then added a log to the fire, checked the man's pulse, and folded her hands. For the first time in many years, the sound of another's breath filled the space under her roof. Outside, the wind began to shift. Leo eventually drifted off to sleep, his head resting on his arms at the kitchen table. Elle, however, remained awake. She moved only to care for the man, cooling his forehead with a damp cloth and whispering words not intended for conscious ears. Words like please and stay and I'll keep you safe, words she hadn't spoken in 15 years, not since the day the barn had burned and what was left of her family had scattered like ash on the wind. The threatened storm never arrived, but heavy clouds loomed over the prairie throughout the night. At first light, the cautious calls of birds began to break the silence. A golden quiet seeped through the window blinds just before sunrise. The man on the sofa stirred. His eyes, a deep hazel rimmed with red, fluttered open, slow and unfocused. He tried to sit up but was immediately pushed back down by a wave of dizziness. Elle leaned in. "Don't try to move too quickly." He winced. "Where?" "You're safe. This is my place. Your boy came to find me." His gaze moved past her, landing on Leo, who was curled up asleep on the kitchen bench. The man's lips quivered. "We didn't intend to stay." "You didn't intend to collapse, either." His fingers tightened on the blanket. "We'll be gone as soon as the sun is up. Just let us rest a little longer." Elle didn't respond immediately. She simply stood, walked over to the stove, and set a kettle on with a quiet, practiced motion. The man sat up again, this time more slowly, his face etched with pain at every movement. In the morning light, his features were delicate, though marked by a deep sorrow. A fading purple bruise was visible near his jawline. He attempted to straighten his shirt, as if he could somehow restore his dignity. "I'm Adam," he said at last. "Elle," she replied. A brittle silence hung between them. "I don't accept charity," he added. She gave a single nod. "I wasn't offering any." Adam's eyes narrowed slightly, a conflict between gratitude and offense playing across his face. "I can clean, cook, wash. I've worked harder than most men," he declared, lifting his chin with what little strength he had left. "I'm not asking for anything," she said, her voice as low and steady as the landscape outside. He glanced toward the door, where his muddy boots lay next to Leo's small, bare footprints. "Still, we shouldn't be here. Your boy asked for shelter. That makes it yours for the night." Another quiet spell was broken by the sharp whistle of the kettle. Elle poured the steaming water into 2 mismatched mugs and brought one to him. He took it with both hands. "You don't have family?" she asked. He looked away. "Not anymore." She let the subject drop. "I'll make breakfast," he said, attempting to stand. Elle's voice was more firm this time. "Rest first. If you collapse again, I'll have to carry you a second time." Adam sank back onto the sofa. The corner of his mouth twitched upward. It was almost a smile. When Leo woke up, he ran to his father, wrapping his arms around him in a tight embrace. Adam kissed his son's head and whispered something soft. Elle turned away to give them their privacy, but she clearly heard the mournful words, "I'm sorry, baby. Papa's okay now. We're okay." Later, Adam insisted on helping. He washed the dishes with hands that still trembled and swept the front porch until beads of sweat formed on his brow. "Elle," he said quietly as she walked past carrying a sack of grain. "I can work for our keep." She paused. "You don't have to." "I do." Their eyes met, and in that moment, a raw understanding passed between them, a mixture of pride, shame, and the fragile beginnings of trust. She nodded. "Then work, if it sets your mind at ease." That night, Leo helped collect eggs from the henhouse. Adam sat at the table, mending one of Il's shirts, the needle glinting in the lamplight. He didn't say much, but his presence settled over the room like a clean sheet on a cold bed, making the space feel less empty, less haunted. Just after midnight, Elle stepped outside for a smoke. The stars wheeled across the vast, familiar sky. But even the heavens seemed different tonight, somehow brighter, or perhaps just less cruel. When she came back inside, Adam had fallen asleep sitting up, the thread still looped through the half-mended cuff of the shirt. Leo was sprawled on a rug by the fire, a blanket twisted around his legs. Elle gently took the shirt, folded it, and placed it on the table beside him. Then she returned to her chair and watched the fire burn down. She told herself they would be gone by morning, that this was simply a passing act of kindness. But somewhere deep inside, she knew better. Sometimes, life sends you strangers to remind you that you were never meant to be alone forever. And sometimes, it only takes 3 knocks on a door to awaken the part of you that still believes in belonging. The next morning cracked golden across the plains. Sunlight streamed through the warped glass of Il's kitchen windows, painting the old wooden floor in honey-colored stripes. The air was filled with the scent of dust and brewing coffee. Adam stood at the sink, his back straight, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and his hair pulled back in a way that seemed both hurried and deliberate. His hands moved over the dishes with the efficient rhythm of someone who had spent too much time cleaning kitchens that were not his own. Elle observed him from the porch, a mug cradled in her hand, her thumb tracing its rim. She hadn't asked him to do the washing, she hadn't needed to. He moved with the determination of a person intent on repaying a debt, whether it had been spoken of or not. Leo sat on the steps next to Elle, kicking his legs back and forth. "Papa says we don't beg." Elle took a sip from her mug. "He didn't." The boy nodded, as if carefully considering her answer. "Did you used to have a family?" Elle paused. "I did." "What happened to them?" The mug stayed at her lips for a moment too long. "They're gone now." Leo didn't press further. Children have a way of sensing when the air around an adult's voice changes. They know when to be quiet, when to study their own feet and let the silence settle like dust. Inside, Adam wiped his hands on a threadbare towel and turned to face her. "We'll be out of your way by evening." Elle leaned against the door frame. "Where will you go?" He blinked. "It doesn't matter." "It does if you're planning to walk with that limp." Adam's mouth tightened. "You gave us shelter. You didn't sign on for anything more." "No one signs on for a knock at midnight, but I opened the doors." He looked away, his jaw clenched. A flush of shame colored his cheekbones. "We've overstayed our welcome." She said nothing, just placed her mug on the table and walked out toward the barn. Adam followed a short time later, his limp now barely perceptible. He was carrying a bucket and headed for the henhouse. Elle didn't try to stop him. She watched as he gathered eggs with gentle hands, humming a low tune to himself, a melody not meant for anyone else to hear. That afternoon, the boy chased chickens and fed sugar cubes he wasn't supposed to have found to the horses. Adam fixed the loose hinges on the front gate. Elle mended a broken yoke, her gaze occasionally drifting to his figure, bent intently over the task. He moved as if he didn't trust stillness, as if resting would cause him to unravel. At supper, they ate in silence. 3 people at one table, the only sounds being the scrape of cutlery and the occasional clink of a tin plate. There were no grand declarations, no lengthy explanations, just their shared presence. After the meal, Adam stood by the window, his eyes fixed on the pale expanse of the horizon. "She'll come looking," he said softly. Elle didn't have to ask who she was. He wrapped his arms around himself. "She doesn't like being left." Elle's voice was steady. "Was it her who gave you that bruise?" He didn't reply, but he didn't deny it either. "Is she your wife?" "No. Not anymore." Elle nodded once, slowly. "If she shows up here, I won't let her in." Adam turned then, his eyes shining but hard. "Don't put yourself in danger for me." "I won't," she said. "But I'll stand where I need to." Outside, the wind picked up, making the tall grasses bend and stirring up dust along the porch steps. A distant coyote yipped. The boy pressed close to Adam's side, clutching his trouser leg. Adam laid a hand on his head, his fingers gently weaving through his hair. They remained that way for a while, 3 shadows cast against the golden twilight. In the days that followed, a routine settled over them like ash. Adam would rise before dawn and sweep the house before the rooster had a chance to crow. Leo shadowed Elle through the fields, peppering her with 1,000 questions, most of which she never answered aloud. She just let the boy talk, letting the air fill with something other than the ghosts of her past. The townsfolk, of course, took notice. Elle usually only went into town for essentials like flour or kerosene. Now, with Adam beside her and Leo trailing behind, the stares lingered. Conversations would halt just long enough for their presence to be felt. At the general store, Mrs. Pritchard leaned in close. "Taking in strays now, Elle." Elle met her gaze without flinching. "Some dogs bite, some don't. Just be careful. People are talking." Elle paid for her bread and left without another word. Adam was waiting outside. "I heard," he said. She didn't look at him. Let them talk. That night, he sat on the porch railing, watching Leo chase fireflies with a glass jar. "You're risking your name." "I haven't had much use for it lately." "I don't want pity." "That's good." "I'm not offering it." He turned to her then, and really looked. "Why are you helping me?" Elle lit her pipe, the match flame flickering and illuminating her deep-set, weary, but kind eyes. "Because you knocked." The next morning, he brought in wildflowers he had found near the creek and arranged them in a tin cup on the table. Elle didn't say anything, but she didn't move them either. Leo drew pictures in the dirt of a house with 3 stick figures. "Papa, me, and the cowgirl," he announced. "I gave you a hat." Elle chuckled, a rare sound that startled them both. Later that day, Adam offered to paint the front steps. "They look worn." "They are." I can make them look less so. She brought him the old can of paint from the shed and watched as he dipped the brush, smoothing white lines across the aged wood. His hands were steady now, his sleeves rolled up, his shoulders straighter. By sunset, the steps shone like bone in the fading light. Adam stood back, wiping sweat from his brow. "That's good work," Elle said. "I used to paint furniture, before. Everything." "You do it quietly," she noted. He smiled faintly. Noise draws attention. That night, the sky deepened to a shade of violet. The stars blinked awake. Adam sat with his back against the railing, his knees drawn up to his chest. Elle brought out a blanket and laid it beside him without a word. He looked at her, his face unreadable in the dim light. "If I asked to stay, would that be too much?" She looked out toward the barn, then back at him. "You already did stay." A breath caught in his throat. "I didn't mean." "You painted the porch," she said. "That makes it yours now." He looked down, his hands clasped in his lap. His voice trembled. "She told me no woman would ever want someone like me. That I was ruined. Too much baggage. Women like that don't understand value," Elle said. He blinked, fighting back tears. "I don't know if I can ever be more than I am right now." She didn't move closer, didn't reach for him. She just let the quiet of the night carry her words. "More than you are is already too much for most women." For a long while, neither of them spoke. Only the cicadas sang their relentless song. Then, quietly, almost like a prayer, he said, "I don't know how to begin again." "You don't have to," she replied. "You just begin." Inside, Leo slept soundly under a quilt, the cat he had named Storm curled up on his chest. Adam stared at the woman beside him, the one who never pried, never judged, never pushed. "You don't say much," he murmured. "No need to, mostly. But when you do, it sticks." Elle shrugged. "I speak like I build fences. One post at a time." He gave a watery laugh and wiped at his eyes. "It's enough." And in the soft hush that followed, neither of them moved. But something between them did. It was the kind of quiet that feels like a seed just before the first rain. Like the stillness before thunder. Like a life not yet begun but waiting, trembling on the edge of something new. By midsummer, the land had settled into a golden hush, where heat shimmered in waves above the soil and sweat formed on the skin before the noon sun had reached its peak. The porch steps Adam had painted were starting to scuff under Leo's bare feet, and the wildflowers he placed on the window sills each morning would be dried and curled by sundown, like paper prayers. Elle noticed the little things. How Adam would press a hand to his lower back when he stood up too quickly. How he tended to avoid mirrors. How he would flinch, not at her, but at the sharp sound of boots on wood. He never said his wife's name unless he had to, and when he did, his voice was soft, almost reverent, as if he wasn't sure he had the right. She also noticed how he had started to laugh more often. It wasn't frequent, but when it happened, it was sudden and full, like something startled out of hiding. He had begun humming again, little half-melodies she didn't recognize. Sometimes he would hum under his breath while mending clothes, and other times in the barn when he thought no one was listening. Leo had taken to following Elle everywhere, from the chicken run to the far pasture. He carried a stick as if it were a rifle and wore one of Elle's old hats, which drooped down over his ears. "You were a soldier once," he said one day. "Wasn't much good at it," Elle replied, adjusting the harness on the mule. "Did you shoot bad people?" Elle paused. "I tried to protect good people." Leo nodded solemnly. "Papa says sometimes bad people don't look like bad people. Sometimes they smell like perfume and talk real sweet." The words landed with more weight than they should have. That evening, Adam made a stew with root vegetables and some old beef he found in the icebox. Elle ate slowly, as she always did, watching the way his hands moved, quick and efficient. His wrists were thin but strong, marked with faint lines like the roads on an old map. A gust of wind picked up, and the shutters rattled once. Somewhere in the distance, a bird cried out, sharp and urgent. Elle stood and walked to the door, her gaze narrowing toward the horizon. Dust was rising in the east, faint but unmistakable. Adam followed her eyes. His breath hitched. "Is it them?" She didn't answer at first. She just stepped down into the yard and walked toward the fence line. Two riders emerged over the ridge, first as shadows, then taking form. They were women. One was tall and broad-shouldered, the other wiry. The way they rode spoke volumes. They were not aimless travelers passing through. Elle's jaw set. Adam's voice was barely audible above the wind. "It's her sister and her cousin." Leo peeked out from behind his father's legs. "Are they the ones who yell?" Adam didn't answer. Elle turned to him. "Go inside. Lock the door." "I won't hide." She didn't raise her voice. "You're not hiding. You're protecting your son." His throat worked as he swallowed. He gathered Leo and went inside. The riders slowed as they reached the gate, dust coating their boots and faces. The tall one spat to the side and tipped her hat with a smirk. "Elle Harper," she drawled. "Didn't expect to find you keeping company." Elle didn't move. "Are you lost?" "We're looking for family. For blood." "He's not your blood anymore." The wiry one leaned on her saddle horn. "Still ours by name. And the boy, too." Elle's eyes didn't waver. "He came here in the dark, barefoot and half dead. That isn't family. That's what you leave behind." The tall one's smile vanished. "That's my sister's husband you're hoarding. Then your sister's a coward." For a moment, the air thickened the way it does before a lightning strike, but no hands went for guns. "Not yet." The tall woman sniffed, then turned her horse. "We'll be back. This isn't over. I'll be here." They rode off without another word, dust chasing them down the ridge until their outlines were swallowed by the distance. Elle stood still for a while longer. Only when the dust had settled did she turn back to the house. Adam met her at the door. He had heard everything. She could see it in his face, a mix of pride, fear, and guilt. "She'll send more," he said. "Let her. I don't want you getting hurt because of me. You didn't bring trouble here. You ran from it." He pressed a hand to her arm, his fingers trembling. That night, Elle took her rifle down from the shelf and leaned it beside the door. "Not for use, just for presence." Leo clung to Storm the cat in his sleep. Adam stayed awake long after, sitting at the table in silence. "You should have let me go," he whispered. "I didn't. I'm not yours." "You could be." His breath caught. He stood up so fast the chair scraped backward. "Don't say that," he said. "You don't know me. I know your kind. I know you sing to yourself when you cook. I know you flinch when you shouldn't have to, and I know your son trusts me enough to sleep easy." His eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them away. "I'm still married on paper, and I'm broken in ways I can't even name." "Then stay anyway," she said. "Let the broken parts rest." He turned away, his shoulders tight, his arms crossed. She didn't press him, didn't step closer. She just left the lantern burning and went to bed. The next morning, the sun rose into a sky split by light and shadow, blue above, but storm-colored along the horizon. The air held a warning. Adam stood barefoot in the garden, his fingers buried in the soil. Leo chased grasshoppers through the tall stalks, laughing. Elle watched from the porch. He straightened up. "I could fix the barn roof." "You'll fall." "Then catch me." She didn't smile, but something shifted in her eyes. By noon, he was up on the ladder, hammer in hand, his shirt tails tucked in. Elle stood below, holding the base steady. A nail bent. He cursed softly. The ladder tipped. Elle caught him, her arms locking around his waist. For a moment, neither of them moved, his face close to hers, his breath hot on her cheek, her hand still firm at his back. He pulled away slowly. "I didn't mean to." "I know." He climbed down, breathless and flushed. He didn't look back. That night, thunder rumbled in the distance. The kind that doesn't fall right away but lurks and waits, making its presence known. Leo fell asleep early. Adam did not. He stepped out onto the porch, his arms folded. "I don't sleep well when it storms," he said. Elle nodded. "Me neither." They sat in the rocking chairs, saying little. The crickets had gone silent. The wind had shifted. "I want to believe," he said at last. "In what?" "In second chances. In safety. In kindness that doesn't come with a price later." Elle stared at the horizon. "Then believe it. I'm sitting right here." The storm didn't break that night, but it lingered, heavy and expectant. Adam stood. "I'll make tea." She watched him go, the door swinging shut behind him. Just before it latched, he paused and looked back. "I'm glad you opened the door that night." Then it closed, and the wind stirred the leaves in the yard, whispering something just out of reach. The storm finally broke just after midnight. There was no warning crack of thunder, no sudden howl of wind, only the slow, steady sound of rain beginning to fall, soft as fingertips against the window panes. Then the wind picked up, coaxing the screen door to rattle in its frame. Lightning flashed behind the hills, illuminating the barn in stark white for a split second. Elle stood by the window, staring out at the drenched horizon. Her rifle leaned beside the door, untouched but never far. She hadn't slept. Not really. Neither had he. Adam sat cross-legged on the rug before the hearth, a quilt wrapped around his shoulders, even though the heat clung thick to the night. His hair was loose, the rain coaxed humidity bringing out its waves. He was humming again, an aimless, broken tune, as if he were patching the world back together one note at a time. Leo stirred upstairs but didn't wake. Storm the cat had taken to curling at the boy's feet, as if he were born to guard him. Elle didn't move from the window. Adam glanced at her, the light from the dying fire carving her silhouette in gold and shadow. "You're waiting for them," he said. She didn't deny it. "They'll come, or they won't. And if they do, I won't run." "I know." He rose slowly and crossed the room to her. The wind threw rain against the house, louder now. Adam reached out and took her hand. It surprised them both. His fingers were cool, shaking slightly, but his grip was firm. He stood beside her, their reflections barely visible in the warped glass. "Elle," he began. "I need to say something. And I need you to not interrupt." She waited. "I spent years thinking I was only what she called me. Stubborn, used up. Too much trouble to love. I stayed for too long. I left too late. I put Leo through too much. And now I'm here, standing beside a woman who fixed my gate without being asked, who left wildflowers on my windowsill, and who taught my son how to feed a calf without spooking it. And I don't know how to let that be real." The wind blew hard, and the lantern hanging outside tilted on its hook. "I'm not whole," he whispered. "I'm tired, and I don't know how to be kissed by a woman who doesn't take things." Her hand tightened around his. "Then don't be kissed," she said. "Just be seen." He broke then, silent tears sliding down his cheeks. He didn't sob, didn't fall apart, just stood there, raw and shining in the dim light like something sacred finally unearthed. She let go of his hand and instead cupped his cheek, her thumb tracing the edge of his jaw. He leaned into her touch like someone starved of warmth. No kiss came, no sweeping declarations, just stillness, the kind that rewrites something deep inside. "You're not too late," she said. "You're just in time." Outside, another flash of lightning revealed two figures on horseback in the distance, close enough to see but not close enough to reach. Adam saw them, and his breath hitched. "They never stop." "They do," Elle said. "When you stop running." He looked at her, his eyes wide. "Then stand with me." "I already am." She stepped onto the porch, the rain instantly soaking her shirt. The two riders didn't move, they just sat on their horses, watching. One raised a hand as if to speak, but Elle didn't acknowledge it. Instead, she raised a lamp, not in threat, not in warning, but in welcome to the truth. he wasn't theirs anymore, and neither was the child. The women turned, perhaps realizing that what they'd come for was no longer available to be reclaimed. Or perhaps because the storm spoke louder than they could. Either way, they disappeared into the darkness, their horses' hooves splashing in the mud like the final echo of a fading past. When Elle came back inside, Adam was drying a towel by the stove. He didn't ask what had happened. He didn't need to. He turned to her, his eyes soft and searching. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." The next morning bloomed gently. The air was scrubbed clean, the grass drenched and gleaming, as if the earth had cried through the night and woken relieved. Adam wore a clean shirt he hadn't dared to take out from his bundle until now. He had combed his hair and let it dry naturally. Leo played near the fence with Storm, who batted at his dangling shoelace with lazy purpose. Elle was in the shed, sharpening an old knife that hadn't been used in years. She stopped when she saw him walking toward her. He held something in his hand, a small, carved wooden box, a keepsake of some kind. "I want to show you something," she nodded, brushing sawdust from her trousers. Inside the box were scraps, pieces of a life, buttons from a baby's Odyssey, a faded photograph, a stone Leo had painted blue. He laid them out one by one on the workbench like offerings. "I've been saving these. Proof that not everything was bad, that we existed somewhere better, if only for a little while." Elle studied each item in silence. Then he took something from his pocket. A ring, worn and golden, now too loose for his finger. He set it on the bench. "I want to leave that behind." Elle didn't reach for it. Instead, she took his hands in hers. There was dirt under her nails, and her palms were still red from hauling water, scrubbing floors, and lifting things on her own for too long. "I never thought I'd ask anyone for anything again," she said, her voice low. "But I've been building a new table. For 3 people. Maybe 4 someday." His breath caught. "I don't have fancy words," she continued. "I don't know how to dress this up. But if you'll stay, if you'll let me earn your peace, one day at a time. I'd like to make you my husband." Silence. The wind moved gently through the grass, carrying the scent of wet cedar and blooming sage. Adam broke. Tears poured freely now, each one heavier than the last. His hands flew to his mouth, shaking. "You mean that?" "I don't say things I don't mean." He stepped into her embrace, trembling with the weight of every hard year, every night spent curled around his child, every time he'd heard the words, "No one will want you," and now this woman, with dirt on her hands and honesty in her eyes, was saying, "I do." He pressed his face into her chest and wept. She held him without asking any questions. In the field, Leo stood watching. He smiled, a slow and wide grin, then turned to Storm and whispered, "Told you. She's the 1 inch." That evening, they gathered wildflowers together, not to put in cups or on windowsills, but to weave into a small bouquet. The sun dipped low, setting fire to the hills in shades of orange and red. A golden hush fell again, but this time, it wasn't laced with sorrow. Later that night, beneath stars that were too proud to blink, Elle whispered the words again. Not for his answer this time, but for the memory that would come after. "Welcome home."